Welcome back to the Old Colony Cast, a podcast about all things Plymouth and surrounding areas. I'm here with my co-host, Tana.
Hello.
And Fish, as always.
Hello.
So I was on Facebook the other day, and I saw a photo of the Irish slaves being brought to America, and I felt the need to share it. And Hannah's like, "You moron, that's not a real..." This is my segue. I don't know. I didn't really know how to segue into this, so I was just...
This is the intro?
That's cool.
Yeah, so I'm like, let's make up a story. So there was this picture that was circling Facebook.
Yeah.
And it was basically a bunch of people
Yes.
in a...
Like a mine shaft.
cagey looking...
It was a mine.
Yeah. And it was some sort of... disparaging, you have nothing to complain about because Irish people were slaves first. Is that the best way?
Slaves also.
Slaves also.
Yes.
Okay. Which, let's just go up front. If you shut this off right immediately, it's just not true.
Yeah. I don't have us like that point comes up in my segue into it like pretty soon after I just kind of talk about how the Irish came to America, and it was in the early early colonial times, mid 1600s. I shouldn't say early. I mean, they could have been, right? But that article is frustrating for a lot of reasons because
I like how you take a deep breath, being like, okay.
Mainly because it's just factually incorrect.
Yeah,
very obvious facts. I'll share a couple because when I saw it, I was like, some of this doesn't sound right. So I looked it up, and actually other people were just as, like, just like, wait, what? About it? So I pulled up some info that just really mirrors what the actual fact versus what this article had written.
Okay.
That's just inaccurate. We'll get to that in a second. First, I just want to start out with how the Irish immigration started in the colonies, and it was in 1654. On ships like the ship Goodfellow. So
this is way early. This is, 34 years in?
Oh, yeah.
See? Look at me doing math.
Look at you.
As long as you don't have to spell 34, we're fine.
That's right.
So the majority of them came as indentured servants.
Mm-hmm.
So if anyone...
Which I find when slavery comes up a lot, people who are trying to apologize for either their ancestors or religion or whatever was supporting, they love to throw out indentured servitude. Yeah. How is that different from slavery?
So indentured servants weren't considered property, so they could not be sold, and they had an option to do the work that was given to them. So they were contracted employees, much like us today.
Right.
We all sign paperwork, right?
But wasn't there usually like some sort of trade-off, like you were...
So you work a certain amount of years.
Yeah.
You essentially get room and board. I'm not going to say it was always the best room and board.
Right. You're still a servant.
Yeah, that your boss was even... You're a laborer, So, or that whoever your employer was even kind. That might not have been the case, but it very well could have been the case, right?
Right.
So it was a contract between your employer and you were the indentured servant. So you had to work the amount of time in your contract.
Right.
A lot of people opted into indentured servitude because they wanted to come to the New World.
Right. And that was part of the deal.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
And you would basically get paid to come over, and you would work there for
So it would be basically
years,
like if I was going to work for a company like Amazon and they're paying me to relocate just the like the early 1600s where you're not nice to people in general.
Yeah, there wasn't like a lot of OSHA, lot of like human resources to call back on.
Yeah, the difference between that and like chattel slavery is
huge.
Yeah, massive.
Yeah, you had rights as a indentured servant. You could
vote.
You could.
Yeah.
When voting became a thing, you could vote.
You were legally a person. You were just legally a person who was
obligated to work for a person.
Somebody else,
and the pay rate of that is also what kind of, I think, makes it an arguable thing, because some people didn't make that much or hardly any, or worked for room and board, or worked for their trip over to the United States. So, or at the time, the colonies, right? So they weren't actually making money, but they were just living alongside these people.
They're basically getting an advance to buy their ticket and then working off the debt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the big difference, obviously. And like I said, many of them opted in because they wanted a new start. That wasn't like a huge immigration rush from Ireland at that point. Mm-hmm. It was just...
It was that first trickle of...
Yes,
yeah, it was a new
yeah.
place some people were going to come over.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So there were a couple stories that has been passed around that might also feed into the Irish slave versus chattel slavery versus indentured servant. That there were pirates who kidnapped children or convicted women felons and sold them in the colonies.
Okay, were these Irish pirates?
Just pirates.
Huh.
They didn't say what...
Okay.
I almost said what brand.
What brand?
They didn't say what brand of pirate. Jack Sparrow
Food
or...
Club pirates.
Yeah. So that's part of like what kind of makes the message confusing, I think, for some people, because to say that any ethnicity of European person was never human trafficked
is probably untrue.
It's probably
Yeah.
untrue.
Yeah.
Correct, right? That's happening today.
Sure.
Right. So, I can see where it gets a little fuddled. That's not anything that is actually the majority of the circumstances, though. Mm-hmm. It was majority of them or indentured servants or not at all. They
Right.
just came.
Yeah.
Right? So this article, I just want to share a couple facts that has been shared around.
So these the article's facts?
Yes.
Okay.
So here's a quote from it. It's not an article. I shouldn't say that. It's one of those things on Facebook that you see shared around, and there is 0 links to any of the information
So it's
shared.
one of those things that, like, at the end,
a-
be like, if you're not a coward, you'd share this.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, copy and paste this into it's like, nope.
Yeah.
I've stopped reading. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
So James II sold 30,000 Irish prisoners as slaves to the New World. His proclamation of 1625 required Irish political prisoners be sent overseas and sold to English settlers in the West Indies. So James II was not born until 1633.
Details.
This proclamation of 1625 was that Irish political prisoners were to be sold as servants to English colonists in the New World does not appear to exist at all.
Okay.
So, first big, like, turnaround in it, not actually...
Just not a thing.
Not a thing. That's not a fact. It was truly fabricated. From 1641 to 1652, this is another quote, English sold 300,000 Irish people as slaves, which is just, like, also simply not true.
That is a massive number of people for 17th century Ireland in general.
Yeah, so that's not even how many people, like, were... like, we're in the colonies. No, like, there's a lot of people in the colonies at this point.
There's like 50,000 people, and they're like, yeah, but 300 of them were slaves.
Yeah, so, like, think about it. Like, yeah, it's just an infactual number.
Just being buried in, like, Irish.
Yeah, so
people.
all
It's
of
like
a sudden, the overwhelming majority were Irish
Yes,
people.
all of a sudden, 3/4 of the people were Irish slaves. Like, wow, okay.
Yeah, so that actually was not the case. It goes on and on like this. For facts of numbers in the amount of people that existed in the colonies at the time that just aren't true, and dates that simply are not factual.
Yeah.
And people saying things before they actually said them or never saying them at all.
So basically, every number on that list is made up.
Yes.
Okay.
So
that falls into that 95% of all statistics
are made up. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's just like a funny article / thing that someone made up. I would go into the deeper part of it, which shows that the person who shared it initially was someone having ill intent to take attention away from other causes going on. Right?
Yeah, it's someone trying to promote their agenda without actually doing any work to even verify what they're doing or showing is real.
So, moving on from that, because I think it's only fair that, everyone, not everyone in America, but America's a mixing pot, right? Mm-hmm. We've had immigrants coming in, and some of them not necessarily wanted or acting fairly with the people who are already here, right?
Yep.
But then after the
and
fact,
vice versa. Yeah.
settling in, and then those people who took over are now upset with the immigrants coming in, and the Irish did not fall short of that. I'm not saying
it's a long history of as soon as you stop being the new guy, you're the old guy, and then you don't like whoever's replacing you.
That's pretty much right.
Yeah.
You immediately become part of the mainstream, and then you need someone to kick at.
Right. So, and that, so the Irish went through that wave.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of times, I think.
Yeah, so they were coming to New England. That's where most of the colonies were settled.
Yep.
Boston was not necessarily the first point that they wanted to visit because they had heard so much about the locals' hatred for Catholics.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the religion of the colonies at the time was Protestant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they weren't really rushing into Boston at this point. They actually diverted to Maine and New Hampshire and some of the more popular settlements there. So, but that's not to say they didn't go to Boston. Plenty of them did, but if they were moving to Boston, they were forced to...
Boston wasn't the Irish hotbed that it is today.
They weren't legally allowed to be Catholic.
Correct. They had to convert to Protestant.
Or at least pretend to convert.
Or, whatever gets you by, right? So, they couldn't obviously practice their Catholic religion out loud, and not only were they forced to convert, but people acted hostile to them, for sure. That was that's a known thing. But they hung out for a bit, and they got a little bit more street cred after the Revolution because they helped fight in it.
Yeah.
So people were...
They've been here longer, and they're less the new guy.
Yeah. So people were like, all right, they're not so bad. That doesn't mean they didn't hate Catholics.
Right.
Yeah, but then again, a lot of that first run, in the 18th century, they weren't like the Irish we think of as Irish now. They weren't like the Irish Catholic guys from Dublin. They were very... Northern Ireland Presbyterian, that first rush, or what we now call the Scotch Irish, Scots Irish, which ended up honestly mostly in Appalachia, any of those
Yeah, and some of the people in I think it's Appalachia.
I'm sorry, English, while my first language is still not particularly strong.
So I believe a lot of those people still carry it's one of the last known American vernaculars to still exist.
Yeah.
As it's technically one of its own languages in the
Appalachian?
Really?
From the Scotch Irish.
Yeah, because they were all Northern Irish, they all came over from Ulster. They were all Presbyterians, which means they were the wrong kind of Protestant.
You're right.
Which is still not something some of them did settle in New England, but a lot of them kind of got shoved to the outer edges of the colonies. They were stuck in Western Mass and Southern Maine and New Hampshire, which is why there's a Londonderry, New Hampshire, because it's named after the city in Northern Ireland.
Yes.
And then they kind of mainstreamed after the Revolution, and then the Catholics came.
Correct.
Are you just reading her notes upside down?
All fact.
I don't really have notes.
Yeah.
Oh,
I just hope everything I'm saying is true and there's no one here to call me on it.
No, send us an email. So we're talking about the Irish people coming to this part of our country, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Boston mostly.
Yeah.
So March 17th, 1737 was the first known observance of St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it was started by the...
Is that even a holiday over there? Is it just something that we have...
Yes, but...
It's celebrated here for different reasons. It was started by the Charitable Irish Society, which is, if I'm correct in my thinking, is one of the oldest still running charities in the United States.
They're something 280-ish years old.
Yes.
Wow.
I believe it's, if not the oldest, one of the oldest.
What is it a charity for?
So it was started for Irish people specifically, because they were still not well off at this point in the country. They were poor, they were still hard laborers, they were in-house servants, they weren't making a lot of money. If they were making money at all, they might have just been going right to their living situation, right?
Yeah.
So some of them needed help, and this was really just services. It was good, like goodwill. So if you needed food, money, whatever, to get you help, like
so it was just kind of helping the people down.
Social service. Yeah. It was really just social service. So they got together out on the street and organized it, and it was for anyone in need, whether you were poor, disabled, or sick, whatever. You could show up, and they would get you set up with social services to help you out.
Nice.
Yes, a very charitable cause. Alpine hiker. Okay, that's a different note. So in the 1820s, that started the bigger immigration from Ireland. For a second, I thought Fish was actually trying to peek over at my nose. I was like,
no, I just needed to eat so I could cough.
I was like, well, what is happening? Get out of here.
6 feet, man, 6 feet.
So,
right, bigger.
So, and Fish is right. Like, this is when the heavier Catholic population of Irish started to come in. It was not yet famine time, but this is when betterment and want of a new life started from Irish people and a lot of Europeans, but they were just a heavier part of the European immigration. So,
and what was the year on this?
1820s.
Okay. I think this may be when my relatives came over.
Okay.
I have to do some math.
Yeah, I honestly don't know when. So, like, it's varying so much on my Irish side of when everyone came over.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really, like...
Like, I know my Nana on my dad's side she has cousins in Ireland.
Yeah.
But then, like, on my mom's side, they came over and, like, worked at Cordish Park when it first opened. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's, like, very varying. So, yeah, 1820s.
Yeah.
Around then. So this is also when we start seeing less or, I don't know, I don't want to say none, but just less indentured servitude with Irish, too. So they're coming over and
just
people.
It's just people.
They're just coming over. They're not, like, signing over the first decade of their time over here.
Right. That doesn't mean it didn't exist.
It was just less prevalent.
Well, yeah, I'm just thinking now, would I rather sign over a decade of work to gain passage and room and board for a decade, or get on a boat and be like, well, I guess I'll figure it out when I get there?
Right.
Like, I think it depends on how old you are. Like,
I suppose, but neither of those sound like fun.
I know, but I'd be a lot more willing to sign away 5 years of my life at, like, 19 than I would be now.
Fair enough.
Just because at that point I'm, like, I'll be 24.
Right.
I still have my whole life now. It's like, I'll be in my 40s.
What's wrong with that? That's
Nothing,
like, you're very young in your 40s, Fish.
Well, I am now, but
Not
18, 20s, and 40s, all of a sudden I'm an old
40s,
man.
that's old.
Like,
that's old man status.
Like, why don't I have grandkids?
Yeah, that's I feel like, right?
Although, I don't know. You know, I heard a really interesting statistic about that sort of thing, being that, you know, we look at the average age was, you know, like, 30s and 40s.
Oh, but it was because infants died.
Because infants died
like
so young, they skewed that statistic.
Once you made it to, like, 5 years old, you're
good.
I'm not saying fine, but you were
far better off.
I see that. Yeah. I still think it goes to say for something that adulthood started a little bit earlier for people.
Definitely,
so therefore, like, by the time you were 40, you're probably like a grandparent.
When you were 14, you were probably expected to get a job.
But now that I'm saying that, I think that was more of a thing for the wealthy.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if you were middle class, working class,
true,
like, finishing off your apprenticeship, you almost didn't marry until you had, like, your feet under you, so you'd actually be in your late 20s, early 30s before you, at least for men, before you started looking to settle down, because before then you couldn't take care of a household. So why would you get married if you couldn't take care of your family?
That's true.
What if you're in love?
Well, you can.
I don't think they married for love that much.
No, that's a whole different set of issues.
Hollywood has ruined me. Okay, so this is when, like, militant opposition of the Catholic immigration really started, and people were actively acting aggressive toward Irish immigrants in so many ways, like ruining their property, homes, whatever, to show that they weren't welcome. The Broad Street riot happened July 11th, 1837, and it was an Irish funeral procession that went through the streets of Boston and clashed with an anti-Catholic Yankee group that I just decided to mix words with them, and they ended up fighting. It was...
Did they start yelling Yankees suck? Because, I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like it's a Boston thing to do.
Yeah, I think when I was reading about that, I think it was a returning crew of firefighters that set it off.
Yeah, it was a fire. It was fire
there was an old fire. There was a fire. They were heading back to the thing. They ran into the
procession.
The funeral procession, said, "Oh no," and then just set off, because that's what you do when you spend several hours fighting a fire. You immediately beat up the Irish people.
Yeah, 800 men involved in the fight, and 10,000 people joined to watch.
Holy crap!
It was a big crowd.
Yeah,
no one died, and only Irish people were arrested.
All 3 of them.
Yep. So,
Wow.
Now we get to the famine.
Okay.
So, the famine was caused from a diseased crop, but it was also caused because England was still taking Irish crop.
Yeah.
So, a little bit of both columns.
Yeah.
I mean,
maybe a little more column B. History is slightly skewed.
At the same time, I mean, there was the 1840s just in Europe in general was just bad famine-wise.
Yeah.
The whole continent was not doing well. I mean, a lot of cultural and social revolutions kicked off in the 1840s because most of the country was most of the continent was starving and was really just sick of nobles.
Right.
Yep. And finally got to the stage where we're either going to starve to death or kill these people.
Truth.
Yeah.
So, known as the hard times in Ireland, not as the great, what do we call it? The
potato famine.
The Great Potato Famine. It sounds like a Disney cartoon movie or something.
What, the Great Potato Famine?
Yeah.
It's the Great Potato Famine, Charlie Brown? I mean,
yeah, something like that. Yes.
Oh my god, I want to see that.
Yes. So, and that occurred between 1845 and 1850. So that's when we got most of the Irish immigrants into the United States. 1 million Irish died in Ireland, and 1 million immigrated over.
Which, considering I think the Irish population total was, I think, about 5 million?
Just about.
So the trope of Irish people eating potatoes from this just that happened to be a potato famine?
Well, I mean, yes and no, but also potatoes were a vast majority crop.
Yeah, it was just a sturdy crop for the land they had.
They have a ton of nutrients for the weight, and they're pretty easy to grow.
And they're delicious. Let's
and
be
also,
honest.
they're I mean,
it's a sturdy crop for the land.
Yeah, they grow well in Ireland. They're super nutritious, and
are potatoes nutritious?
Yeah. Do I look like someone who doesn't eat high-calorie potato food?
Well, high-calorie, not necessarily.
I mean, they got stuff in them.
High-calorie at a time when you're farming.
Is nutritious. Yeah.
Kind of key.
Yep. At least to keep some energy.
It's not keto-friendly, but...
Yeah. Neither am I.
So, they started pouring into Boston, and they settled in a lot of areas, the North End being one of them, which is funny because it's mostly Italian now, right? So... South Boston, obviously, Fort Hill, and they were mostly just laborers. They were farmers and worked.
Yeah, I mean, they were poor people. That's
yes,
what they did.
Yes, they were fairly unskilled in other things and just laborers, right? So,
the O'Driscolls were fishermen.
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
We have a fishing schooner, on our family crest.
So, on the way over here, they were brought over on what is now referred to as coffin ships. I don't know if they were referring to them as coffin ships at the time. Probably, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
It was pretty gross. Lots of typhoid going on.
Yep.
And they called them coffin ships because of how many people were shoved into them and dying.
Yeah.
So, which when I first heard of coffin ships a long time ago, I thought it had something to do with the actual type of ship it was.
Was it in a Flogging Molly song?
Maybe.
I'm not saying no, but I'm too busy looking up potato nutritional information.
Yeah,
he's all offended that. They're nutritious, and I know it.
I
have a thing.
Carbohydrates. What do they got? B12. What's going on with them?
So your average medium potato has just 110 calories, no fat, sodium, or cholesterol, half your daily value of vitamin C,
Oh, nice.
Huh?
more potassium than a banana, an excellent source of vitamin B6.
So that means they're radioactive.
And
Because
all-
of potassium.
Yeah. And also a fiber, magnesium, and antioxidants. Potatoes are fantastic for you.
Oh, so they're good.
So
Especially
why is
when-
everyone like, oh, like just
Eat
because you
up,
deep
'cause-
fry them, they're suddenly
And
not?
Look, just because I'm deep frying them covered in cheese and bacon doesn't mean they're not good for me.
I think, too, potatoes fell into that huge carb cancel culture that
Yes.
happened in the 90s. So
And I'm pretty sure originally people thought potatoes were poisonous.
I thought that was tomatoes.
I think both.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Eat at your own risk. So, they said that sharks followed the ships because they were just like
Just
dumping
dumping people
bodies.
over there. Oh, I
Yeah.
could see that. That'd be gross.
Which I didn't really think of sharks as like scavenging. But yeah,
Yeah,
I guess,
yeah.
right?
They'll basically...
Because I've seen them going to town on like old whale carcasses.
I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of sharks will basically eat whatever you throw at them. I mean, they've cut open like sand tigers with bicycles and license plates and
Cool.
bumpers.
What the hell?
I'm not dumping out that. I wish I could remember the. I was gonna make a Jaws reference and I can't remember the little kid's name.
I
Kipner,
have no
the little
idea.
Kipner boy.
I think so, yeah.
God,
And see that thing cut open, and see that little Kentner boy spill out all over the dock.
So the typhoid. Let's get back to that, right?
all right, typhoid, coffin chips,
Yeah,
got it.
there we go. I'm on it. So typhoid, because of the crazy outbreak, it was also coming into Boston. People weren't just dying on the ships; they were bringing it into the city, and they made Deer Island a quarantine space for people with typhoid, which was mostly Irish immigrants. Not to say it was just only Irish immigrants, but it
But
was
mostly.
But mostly.
it was
Yeah.
mostly, right? And it was just such a vast amount of people. Hundreds of people died that were. They're still buried in unmarked graves over there.
Oh, really?
If you want to take a look. Or just like from above, right?
Just, bring a shovel, make a
Right.
day of it.
Yeah. So the Irish started to kind of grow in power, obviously, the more that came along. And by power, I don't mean like... They just had more numbers to like
Yeah,
kind
I
of...
mean-
I just literally had in my mind Irish X-Men.
Yeah. They just...
So Banshee?
Yeah, they just had the numbers to support their causes at this point,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which was the rights for themselves. They started
Yeah.
unionizing.
Yeah, shockingly, when you get a whole bunch of people in the area who can all vote the same way, all of a sudden you start
goes in
winning
their favor,
elections.
yeah.
Right. And likewise, there were people who were like, oh, heck nah, they're not going to do anything about, like, we're going to squash this
Those
for
pesky
them.
Irish,
So it's the Know Nothing movement.
which I've heard.
Yeah.
You have?
Yeah, I've heard of
Cool.
that.
Look at you.
Don't. Not an idiot.
I didn't say you were.
Please stop being so pleasantly surprised that Annie
I
knows
know.
things. That's my job.
Jeez.
So, I didn't know because it's a secret society. Or it
Huh.
was. Kind
Okay.
of. Because if anyone was approached about it, they would say they know nothing. But they
Yeah.
were known as the political group, which I find hilarious.
The Know Nothing political
No,
group?
the Native Americans.
Wait, what? Oh,
It was
like
the
they-
Know Nothing movement in their
They call
political
themselves
part.
the Native Americans.
Yeah,
Or-
and this was kind of like featured in Gangs in New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Bill
yeah.
the Butcher was a Native American.
Yes,
Yeah, it
he
was that
was.
time of year, yeah.
Yes.
Air quote Native American.
I love that for them. That's
Yeah.
hilarious. Never a dull moment in colonizing history. So, folks, I don't really love that. So, the political party grew in power and actually held office and took the majority of the Massachusetts legislation. So they started passing anti-Catholic laws. So you were not allowed to read or practice Catholic Bible,
Doctrine?
anything like
Yeah,
that.
couldn't read- you had to read the King James Bible.
In schools
Yeah.
specifically, they weren't like stopping people in their houses, but I'm sure people were getting a lot of crap about it still, right? They formed the nunnery committee, which would go and like hustle nuns, like actual nunneries,
Wow.
and Catholic schools, and just like
So weird. Of all the people that I feel like I would have to like mess with, nuns are not on my list ever.
yeah, and
How much
they
of that is just because for us now, nuns are very much the Catholic school teacher, kind of strict school marm.
Yeah, I don't know, but
yeah, weird times.
Yeah.
So they also banned the burying of Catholic people in public cemeteries,
oh really?
which is like such a weird power move.
Yeah.
And they were in power for a few years, but honestly, like, just a few years. They didn't actually hold for that long because of some of them had different beliefs in slavery. So that started to, like, become more apparent in the country, so they really fell apart for several reasons, but also because the Irish were now becoming politically inclined and growing with their own political
owning property
movements.
and having money and,
exactly.
Yeah,
all the things you need to make up the laws.
Yeah. As soon as you get to the stage where you're the majority of the electorate, it's in a fair and just society, it's really hard for anyone trying to hold down the majority to hold power without cheating badly.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Captain Obvious.
Yeah, whatever.
Just trying to tie into the present times, Andy.
Yeah, we're just talking. So the most common means of work for Irish were still like labor, so domestic servants for women, and construction quarries and working on the docks, farms. If like not, back then there were more farms, but obviously now it feels a little different. But it was becoming more of a city vibe, and the Irish helped build like the city we know today. So the whole like Faneuil Hall area, the financial district, like Irish hands all over that place.
Yeah.
So, sorry, gotta look through my notes, guys. So the Irish need not apply signs, right? Those existed, but also on the opposing end, there were signs for looking for Irish help.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I've never heard that before.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there were both ends of the spectrum. I'm not going to say that the people who had the signs up looking for Irish help had the best intentions in posting those signs.
Well, probably not.
No, right?
Yeah.
Probably looking for cheaper labor.
Yeah.
For people who aren't yet.
I thought you were going to say there was like no Italian apply kind of things. But.
I can't speak to anything in that regard, but no, they had both ends of the spectrum. So yeah, those signs existed, and that was indeed a thing. And it was it was a Catholic issue.
Yeah.
It still could have
because
lingered on an immigrant issue, right?
And this held up for a very long time, but for some reason, Protestants, especially in the United States, have a really weird image of Catholics.
Yeah, they thought they were evil.
Like, not just evil, but, like, very much the Pope. They kind of assumed that they were very Pope-heavy. If you were Catholic, you were Catholic. If you were, like, a Catholic American, you were Catholic first, and then American second.
I remember there was...
And, like, there were a lot
and
of
the Pope
issues.
was law. They thought they were going to disband what they knew of government.
Well, that was like an issue when John F. Kennedy was running because he was Catholic, and they're like, the Pope's going to run this country kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's the kind of thing where it's like, guys, it's not a thing anymore.
Yeah.
Especially for American Catholics now, it's very weird.
Right. Oh, yeah, right now. We could talk about that another time.
I would love to go off on, Catholic or for that matter, it's the Irish Catholic Church at one point, which is weird, but I don't have the research at hand, and we also have kind of a time crunch, so.
Right. Don't worry, guys, we're almost to the end. So 1859, Catholic Irish boy refused to recite Protestant prayer, and he was beaten, and this led to the Elliott School Rebellion, where 300 boys withdrew from school, and it started St. Mary's Catholic Church. Catholic school, sorry. I'm sure there's a St. Mary's Catholic Church in every town, but I know we got one. So just another, like, movement with the Irish.
So they just were like, we're not going to regular school, we're making our own?
Yeah.
Nice.
Because if we can't be Catholic here, we're just going to go be Catholic in our own place.
Yeah. And by the 1870s, very large population of Irish, so it was 56,000, almost 57,000 out of the 250,000 of people living in Boston were Irish.
How many out of Boston?
250,000 people.
How is that possible if there's 300,000 Irish slaves that were brought here earlier, Hannah?
It's crazy, right? The numbers just don't add up. So, so they obviously started stepping into their own political seats.
Yeah.
They leaned heavily into we call like the Democratic left.
Yep.
For as far as their policies. I think we kind of saw a little bit of that with the first celebration of St. Patrick's Day, right?
Yeah.
With like opening up social services for people.
Yeah.
And I learned something kind of new, which I didn't really know. So before they actually had leadership in government, they had their leaders in political parties, which were wards. And it's not new, but I haven't heard that word since the 6th grade.
What did you say, ward?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a ward, like a representative for their ideals in the community.
Yeah, and they were called like ward bosses.
Yes.
The only place you really ever hear about it is either here or in Chicago.
Right.
And both in very heavily...
Leave it to Beaver. Ward Cleaver.
Oh.
Yes, Andy.
True.
Yes. He was also a political operator. It just never came up because it was an old-timey sitcom.
Yeah, it wasn't like good for the script. So Patrick Joseph Kennedy,
Heard of him?
JFK's grandfather,
Yep.
was one of these wards.
Okay.
And he soon took office in Massachusetts in the legislature.
A little bit of a shady dude.
Sure.
Just a skosh.
But, he's an episode.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, that's a deep dive.
And with the Civil War...
Actually, both of his... Or not both, because he had more than two, but he had JFK had two grandfathers who were basically ward bosses at the same time.
Yeah.
Because not only was the Kennedy part of Fitzgerald Kennedy, but also... I think his name was P.J. Fitzgerald, was also basically doing the same thing at the same time. Hannah, am I jumping at any notes again? I'm sorry.
No, you're
Okay.
good.
But yeah, they were both there at the same time, just P.J. was less... I don't want to say prominent, but less inclined to be visibly in charge.
There you have it,
Okay.
folks. No, and that's a wrap. No.
Yeah, that's another episode.
So... Civil War, right?
Civil War.
The Irish were not necessarily for abolishment of slavery.
Okay.
As not speaking for every Irish person that existed in that time, it was just the general consensus. So, although they were not for it, they were also not against the call of duty, so to speak.
Yep.
So, the quote is not out of anti-slavery, but out of loyal submission to legitimate rule. The Irish.
So, they were kind of the poorer people at the time. Do you think it was a matter of I'm worried about feeding my family and less about what's going on nationally?
Well, yeah, and they were like, it's draft. So they were like, they weren't like, hell yeah, let's.
They're like, okay,
weren't like
I got to go. Yeah.
And their reasons for joining up weren't so much, the slavery is more the, I'm sorry, guys. No, you can't secede. That's not how this works. Get back here.
Right. So, it was not their ideals that kept them in the fight for the Union, or even brought them to not dodge the draft. But it was the fact that they were just like loyal to the times. So, in the first elected mayor in Boston, that was Irish. Hugh O'Brien, 1884. And pretty much that leads us to where we are now.
Nice. We're recording this from 1885.
Yeah. No, from there...
on my wax cylinder.
like, Boston since then
that's
has become
1884.
a hugely...
It's
Irish...
Like Irish Mecca.
It's one of the... I'm not going to say most Irish, but it is... Like, being Boston Irish is a cultural touchstone for a lot of people.
Boston has backdoor found a way to make St. Patty's Day a holiday.
Yeah.
Yeah, Boston celebrated St. Patrick's Day enough that Ireland picked up on it and started celebrating St. Patrick's Day.
So the amount of, like, political influence they had from 1900 on only grew to the point where, like you said, JFK... becoming president was obviously for the whole country was like what, because it was still not Catholic religion.
Would you have put that on par with like an Obama? Like, was it that groundbreaking?
I think in the times,
because you would run into a lot of the same kind of commentary where, like, he's not really American. It's like, what is he going to do? Is he like, you'll hear Obama's a secret Muslim, and
Did Trump want JFK's birth certificate
probably.
too?
You never
like
know.
he just, it's like he goes to a Catholic church, the Pope's going to run the country, and it's like,
Yeah,
nobody
I
knows.
remember hearing that.
There's
was like
a lot of-
major concern.
That was a big
Yeah.
concern, and for some reason, it's just... And I don't know how much of it is legitimate concern and how much of it is just politically opportune to...
Slamming the other guy?
Yeah, it's like...
That's all it is.
Do you really care, or is it just it's the shot you take because it's convenient?
So, I mean, perspectively, JFK did not end his presidency on a high note at all.
Well, no.
No, but
But I'm just saying, like,
He didn't even really end it. Someone ended
yes,
it for him.
that's what I mean. But, like,
but
to
at
think
the
of,
same,
think
but
of
at the
like,
same time, it's... I don't think he was assassinated for being Catholic.
no, but
No.
people did not like him.
That didn't help, though.
No,
No.
definitely
Yeah.
didn't help. There were I don't know. I think if there's any time to look back in history as far as like the comparative, it's a good touch point, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of hot buttons that were happening at that time in
Sure.
America.
Yeah.
You could argue that hot buttons happen every election.
Yeah,
but
you can, but not like
Yeah.
it is now.
no, they're
Yeah.
on fire, right?
Yeah.
So, and it certainly was the case then. Different means of, I don't know, thought processes for people, I'm sure, between the two presidencies,
Yeah.
JFK and Obama, just given that, like, religion and race,
Yeah.
separate things, and
But
that...
it just seems like there's some real
But
connective points.
there
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
are. I would agree with that for sure. But yeah, it's not. I don't think anyone really looks at the Catholic religion with maybe down south. I don't know.
See, it's,
Yeah, I bet you, like, if you go
I think part is
Bible Belt,
it
Midwest.
hasn't come
Yeah.
up in a long time.
It hasn't.
Yeah.
Like I
Certainly.
can't. I mean, we haven't had a Catholic.
Well, the interesting thing is I was raised...
I mean, we had a Mormon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was raised Catholic
Is
in the
weird on
Catholic
many
Church, and that whole, like, anti-Catholic thing, I never understood. Wouldn't even say understood. Never realized it was a thing until I started studying JFK's assassination in high school.
Yeah.
And people
Yeah.
were like, they didn't like him because he's Catholic, and I was like, what are you talking about?
I mean,
Yeah, but
they
how
didn't
much
like him for a lot of
and I think
ideals
a
too.
lot-
But
I think a lot of us not really being familiar with it is
it's a very
There's a
Irish
lot of
Catholic area. Yeah,
Catholics
it's a
out here.
very
I mean,
Irish Catholic area.
Yeah.
either
Yeah.
Irish or you're Italian or you're Portuguese,
Right.
which means that you're either Catholic or Catholic or Catholic.
Yeah.
true. Yeah, it's.
Like-
I would
like
say
the-
from the
the-
Irish coming in, it only became more Catholic.
Yeah.
Contrived like residents of Europe coming over. So
Yeah, it just and at that point it's like it just though we were settled by weird Protestant separatists, it's like by the 19th century we were very heavily Irish in a way that a lot, especially the South, never was.
Yeah.
So for us, it stopped being weird.
yeah, it's weird to go out of New England and like people have like not a lot of Irish background.
Yeah, it's
Like
it's
ethnic
weird, like
background.
coming across people. It's like, so anyway, we were all raised Southern Baptists. Like, I have no idea what that is.
And also, you're not Irish at all, not even a little bit.
Yeah, like no one? Like you don't know a Sully anywhere?
I'm sorry, but like you go through and it's like we're all Irish and Portuguese,
Yeah.
all of us.
Yeah.
yeah, to a T.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Is like you can talk to people, be like, "Do you know a Sully?" And they're like, "I know 4."
Yeah.
And you go other places, and they're like,
Yeah.
"Not a 1."
All right. Hey,
It's like
Fitzy.
Yeah,
all,
Fitzy,
Fitzy
Sully.
and Sully and Murph. And
Murph.
Yes.
Oh yeah, Murph's another super positive.
somehow I never ended up with that one.
Yeah.
It's too bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, we live in it's a largely descendant Irish area.
Yeah.
But you can tell there was some real dislike towards them because my family name was O'Driscoll,
Yeah.
and when they came over here, they dropped the O because they didn't want to be
Oh,
mistaken. They didn't want to be mistaken as Irish.
Oh, is that? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes, for
Which,
that.
if you look at every member of my family, you're like, the O was not really.
Yeah, I'm
you
sorry,
know.
pale redheaded. Dude.
Yeah, you're all pale and redhead, and a lot of them are skinny.
I mean that.
I've met your kids.
So, in short, there's a lot of Irish people here still.
It's kind of a thing.
It's a
Yeah.
thing.
We have a basketball team because of it.
yeah.
Yeah, they basically named it after the
Do you
dominant culture. Yeah, and did it in a way that is now not coming up as incredibly racist, which is nice.
I know, right? Yeah, that was one of those.
Yeah.
Like, we're not... Although, at some point, they should probably start renaming it Paddy Wagon, because, in retrospect, that sounds bad.
Well, that's slang. That's not...
Yeah.
I'm sure they don't call it.
Yeah, I was like, is it like written on cop car?
I don't know. I've never been arrested.
No, but the paddy wagon isn't like a
I know,
cop
it's
car.
like-
No,
like
it's a
the
thing. I know
van.
what it
The
is.
main,
Yeah.
you toss everyone
Yes,
in.
I
But
know what
that's-
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure they have a different
I'm
cop
sure,
vernacular.
I'm sure
for
they do, but I'm sure they don't at the same time.
That was a perfect way to put it. So, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, most people I know have ties back to Ireland in some way in this area.
Mm-hmm.
I think in a lot of ways, like myself speaking earlier, I don't exactly know a lot of the timelines. I have a general idea, and it's not necessarily anything I know a whole lot about, I will say.
Yeah, it's. I'm on
I know
same
the
page.
Americanized version of being Irish.
Yeah.
I know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think that's a lot of us. We tend to know because we've all been here for so long
Yeah.
that we don't have, like, especially for the Irish, we don't have that recent immigrant story anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's more.
Yeah.
It's more
Like,
a
we've
Boston,
mainstreamed-
Massachusetts
Yeah,
thing than
I mean,
the mother
we've
country.
all mainstream. We've all basically we're just another flavor of white people. And it
Yeah.
doesn't really matter.
None of
anymore.
us
Yeah,
refer
we're-
to Ireland as the mother country
No.
No, definitely not.
or the homeland. It's just
No.
Ireland.
Yeah. I mean, some people might, but I don't.
No.
So, one thing to wrap up as far as going back to that article, if you had seen it, if you had shared it, there's a lot of things, and I'm not clean of this myself, right? I'm sure I've shared something that was not entirely factual, that fake news exists on Facebook for many reasons, or for no reasons at all. People just make stuff up. But for a lot of people, I think they saw it and had zero ill intent in sharing it. They thought it was an interesting piece of their history
Yep.
that they weren't quite clear on the details on.
Yeah.
So if you or someone you know shared it, I don't immediately think that was...
the other thing is, if you're on Facebook tomorrow and someone shares it, you don't have to jump down their throat.
No, definitely not.
Don't jump on the
Yeah,
throats,
you can just
but
be like,
you can
hey,
still
that's
say, hey, this
not
isn't
accurate.
right, like,
Yeah.
at all.
And for me, it's the historical accuracy of it more than anything that I'm like, oh my god. Because, I mean, certainly, like I said, I'm not one of mistakes or necessarily getting everything 100% right. But when I read it, I knew something was off.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, I think people sharing it are sharing it out of genuine curiosity and interest.
Yeah.
For the most part.
I think it's I think there's that, and then there's still the. It does have a second.
There's
very malicious,
malicious people, but
No,
yeah.
Yes, I know. I know because
if you explain it to them, they're still going to be malicious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for the more examples of from personal experience that I know, most of it was shared out of hey, this is interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to share it. So, which is fine because I truly don't believe they were looking to do anything malicious from
Right.
doing that. So,
long story short, do a quick Google search before you share stuff like that. It's super easy to do.
yeah.
And if you have topics, suggestions, comments, did we miss something? You can write us at oldcolonycast@gmail.com, and we will address your email on air. Sure. Yeah, I mean, we'll do that,
Yeah.
I suppose.
Unless it's really mean.
Yeah. Unless it's mean about fish, because then we'll totally talk about it. Or probably me. I'm fine with that. But thanks again for listening, and we'll see you back again in 2 weeks. I think we still don't have a sign off, though. Thanks for listening to the podcast. You can find us on all social medias at Inebri-art, except for Instagram. We're at Inebri-art6. You can email us with your questions, complaints, and whatnot at Inebri-art@yahoo.com. And if you're looking for more podcasts, you can check out the other podcasts on our network, Retro Redoctopus, America's Hometown Horror, and, of course, Bar Talk, Old Colony, and Inebri-art Podcast, the original. So check those out and subscribe and comment so we can reach more people, and thanks for listening.